Welcome to the Trailbreaker Podcast. I'm Aaron Feinberg. In this podcast, I explore what it takes to be a trailbreaker. Through intimate conversations with people carving new paths across the landscape of business, art, and sport, we dig in on how to excel across seemingly disparate endeavors. What drives people who manage to succeed multidimensionally? Is it how they think? Is it meticulous planning and follow-through? Or is it some measure of delusional optimism? My guest today is Brolin Mawejje, a snowboarding Olympic hopeful representing Uganda, a sponsored rider for Burton, and a medical student pursuing his MD. He's also passionate about history, learning to garden, and having the biggest positive impact he can have on the world. We spoke about his recent focus on transitions, how snowboarding is his vehicle for impact, and his summer of introspection. Good morning, Brolin, and thank you very much for taking some time out of your day to join me here in Jackson.
Good morning, Aaron. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I know you got to hang out with some family while you were here. You also got to play in the mountains, and then later this afternoon, you're driving back down to Salt Lake?
I did, yeah. I got to see my mom here in Jackson and see my sister, and planning a drive back to Salt Lake, in a couple hours, just before the light goes.
Right on. And I know that life is based kind of split between these two spots, wintertime up here and then rest of the year down in Salt Lake. And you got a pretty busy schedule down there between your medical studies, your training for the Olympics. What's life like down there for you now, given all the changes that we've all gone through due to COVID and obviously how that impacts, your schooling or your training or anything else for that matter?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. I would say life right now, since we're currently in summer, it's weird. We just came out of COVID, like you mentioned, and we're in a little bit of a holding pattern. For myself, usually summers I spend in the Southern Hemisphere, really chasing snow. But this year it's a little different. I've spent majority of my summer kind of nose deep into books and a little bit more into the medical side of things and studying. I picked up tutoring also this summer, which was pretty cool for me, and kind of diving back and working with students. And also just, waiting to get my body ready for snow. Right on. And we're going to talk a good amount about that aspect of your life, but just in terms of the medical side of things. So you've been tracking for what degree ultimately? What's your end goal if you can get there in terms of how you want to be in the world of medicine? If I could get down the long marathon, I'd like to, right now I have the MPH, which is a little more specific in the epidemiology side of things and field of like kind of disease like we're going through with COVID. But the dream is to have the MD and also have a little bit of the sports therapy or sports medicine side of things.
Right on. And for those who don't know what MPH is, what Masters of Public Health?
Yeah, that's a Masters in Public Health. But I emphasized a little bit. I went with the epidemiology and global health just because I really like the study of disease. And, growing up in Uganda, disease is something you like to study.
Yeah, it's a useful skill to have.
A little bit, yeah.
And then in terms of the tutoring with the students, is that something new for you?
I used to tutor when I was in college. So I was a TA when I was in college, and, to kind of try to help myself learn, I picked up tutoring here and there, some high school students. And I think it's a good way to dive back into like material. Right on.
And in terms of, obviously you said it helps you learn, now what would you say the value or the joy you get from doing it is?
The older I grow, the more I kind of get curious with keeping my brain a little bit alive. And it's just nice to see, what the next generation has to learn and kind of the processing of information and the change of like, just kind of learning brute information to critical thinking and having people have a little more thought to the information they're learning. So I think it's cool.
It is awesome. And in terms of what's going on with snowboarding, and I know you're sponsored by Burton and a few others, and you were on this nice track for the Olympics, and then you had an injury, and then I know that you've been actively trying to train for the next iteration of the Olympics. But give us a sense of where all this is at.
Yeah, I just joined the Burton team, which is one of the, I would say it's the biggest honor that I've ever had in snowboarding, a kind of a dream come true, and both exciting and nerve-wracking at the same time. And like you mentioned, I've just kind of been on this journey to try to pursue snowboarding at the highest, I would say at the highest competitive stage, which for myself will be representing Uganda in the Olympics. But really with the COVID and everything that's happened in the past few seasons, it's the pursuit of trying to be the best snowboarder I can be.
And so if something happens with the Olympics, everything from COVID continues to cause us difficulty, and who knows, maybe the Olympics doesn't happen, or, maybe something happens and you're not going. What does your snowboard career look like for you outside of the Olympics?
I think my snowboarding career just continues outside of the Olympics, whether it happens or not, it just is. Right now, for me, I look at it as like I'm a Burton rider, and with that brings a little pedigree and kind of prestige that you're trying to chase, which means, working on whether it's the biggest skills or the smallest skills and perfecting them to that level of Burton rider. I don't know, I'm just trying to push myself to be one of the best snowboarders or belong in the crowd of those guys. Yeah.
And I see some of the stuff you put out on social media, and whether you're literally on snow or you're, in the training park, on the trampolines or what have you. So not to give up all your secrets, but what are you working on right now that you feel like is going to push your skill set to the next level?
I'd say right now it's a transition. So, the bigger the contests, the bigger the venues, it means bigger builds, bigger jumps, which means a lot more technique. And for myself, not having been a traditionally trained, what I like to say, classical trained snowboarder, there's a lot of catch up that I've had to play in my snowboarding career. And, the pinnacle of that is transition, being able to put all that together into a competitive course, especially on like slopestyle World Cup level slopestyle courses.
So, meaning the way that you transition from feature to feature?
Both transitioning from feature to feature, but also transition as in the literal aspect of like the vertical transition has been added into the course. So they kind of, the bigger the sport is being pushed and the more people are learning tricks, the more I think the community, the builders, the judges are trying to figure out who's a good rider and who has mastered just riding a certain course. And for myself, there's a lot of these quarter pipes that are being put into the courses, and, understanding how to ride those efficiently, safely, and really push myself on those type of features.
And I don't know if this is how you were explaining it, but what I was pulling from you is that there's like not only the transitions of jumps, right? As the courses get bigger at the highest level, literally the scope and size of the features is bigger. So there's this adapting to the transitions as they grow. But then also, I think what you were saying too is the transition overall of the sport, whether what the expectations of the judges, the way that other riders have progressed, and you keeping up, or is that what you're kind of driving for?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Got it. I want to make sure I didn't miss. I mean, that's where transition means a lot of things to a lot of people. Yeah. So right on. And then maybe the question that a lot of people have sometimes, and you may have answered this a million times over, is, pursuing any one of these things by itself is a full-time job, a lot of energy, a lot of focus. You've got med school, you've got Olympics, you've got pro rider. How do you keep it all together?
I mean, that's the question that I ask myself. Definitely, I think it's a juggle it's a wave. The way I like to look at it is like it's different train stations and different stops. You focus at different things. And right now, we have all gone through this transition of COVID, sitting at home. And for myself, that was, that blink of an eye or the light bulb, where it's like you have this degree in epidemiology. People are suffering from a disease that falls under this field. So how can you help? How can you get back into the medical side of things? And getting back to the Medicare side of things, of helping the older population figure out their insurance policies and also work with the hospitals and how to track the disease, was really how I utilized that time of COVID. So it's not like I'm snowboarding and doing, medicine or, trying to be a professional snowboarder at the same time. But it's like, how can I maximize the best person I can be and with the opportunities I've been given? And I've always just had that nagging feeling of how can you keep your pedal on the, down on the metal.
Right. Interesting. And I was going to ask you, like, is this how you've always been? But you just sort of mentioned it. It's like, is that you've just been wired that way?
I don't know if I was wired that way, but maybe my programming was just kind of tailored a little bit and twitched that way.
What do you mean by that?
I think, our worrying is based off our exposures and our experiences. And I think given my circumstances, I look at myself and my siblings and I see from where I started, given to where I am right now, a lot of those transitions and pivots have been created by whether the right people in my right corner, the right place at the right time. And I work hard, or I worry about, like any other person in the world, am I doing the right thing? But, a lot of those circumstances are realigned by, that worry aligning with a little bit of hard work, but also in the right place, right time. So my snowboarding is a good pinnacle of that. I never set out to be an Olympic snowboarder, but I did set out to try to be one of the best snowboarders in my town. And, I just happened to be in Jackson Hole, and that town just happened to have great snowboarders, including some of my brothers. So I don't know. I think, like I said, my programming has been tailored a little bit.
Yeah. It makes me think of, people can have all the opportunities in front of them and they don't make anything happen. Right. And then those other folks who are just extremely resilient, and there's this fascinating research across resiliency. So, what goes on for people who are just exceptionally resilient, and the interplay between, personality and just inborn traits with also environment, and, whether they are looking at twin studies or, it's just very interesting. But, when you were talking about the worry that you have, what is that really all about for you? What do you worry about?
I mean, my biggest worry lately is, who am I as a person? I think we all question that, especially, COVID has brought that out from so many people, but, looking at yourself and, either detaching yourself from your accomplishments or detaching yourself from the goals. When I was 18, I dreamt big. When I was 16, I dreamt a little smaller, just because the possibilities I saw were a little bit limited. And then 18, it opens up, and my dreams were mountains, and these mountains have become my identity. And, who am I as a person who is climbing these mountains? Am I just the individual? Am I the mountains I'm climbing?
And how old are you now?
I just turned 29.
Still a baby, but
I don't know about that.
But yeah. But that's I think, and it's interesting because, we tend to ask these sort of existential questions at those marks, right? So the 18 to 20, and then again, 27 to 30. And I think it's good. It's a good question to ask. In how do you define yourself? Because, I've talked about this in other episodes of the show, just if you attach yourself to just the outcome or the thing that you do, it doesn't necessarily represent who you are. Yeah. And I think, having that sort of bigger purpose, and I heard it's come out even in this conversation, around the tutoring and having a way to help, and the care for the elderly in the medical space, and the pushing of yourself to the biggest version, or the honoring of the folks in your life who've supported you and the gifts that have come. You don't take anything for granted, it doesn't seem like.
I try not to, because I don't know. We all have, as we grow, that idea of like, how did I get here? And for myself, as I evaluate that question over and over again, it's hard not to almost like pay it forward, just because I can't pay it backwards. I don't know what I did to kind of deserve, the journey I've had, but like, I'm grateful to be able to, kind of put myself into this space and see how can I put it backwards to, give back what I can't give back.
Super honorable. And then the other part of it too is it just seems like your platform, your ability to do more with this continues to get bigger. You have bigger companies that you're around. You've got, the more degrees you get, the more education you get, the bigger impact. In terms of where you think you want to take things, obviously, some things to be determined about Olympics and weather and injuries and what have you. But just if you were to sort of share your biggest vision of what the next couple of years look like, what is that for you?
I think for myself, the next couple of years is really finalizing that foundation that could create an impact on the world. And I've always kind of had a vision where my snowboarding was the vehicle that can allow me to create that impact. And the more, like you mentioned, like I'm detaching myself from the destination, the more I'm realizing I could be that same vehicle. But for me, not to kind of go too broad and bring it like very specifically, it's like, it's simple, I have 6 months to try my best, to get to the best stage of, sports history, which is for ourselves, snowboarding, not only in the World Cups or the upcoming World Cups, but preparing myself for, a battle of both, mental and physical identity, I've set a goal. It's been 6 years, training, pursuing, pushing myself, injuries, like you mentioned, concussions and goals, setbacks, just to try to push myself to this, to this goal, this little target. And the target is not moving. We all know. So for me right now, the focus is how can I mentally become the best version of myself so I can get ready to put myself out there at the world stage and perform at the best with other athletes that are trying to do the same. And once that's done, really the question is like, okay, that next goal, how can I continue to push my snowboarding without the idea of I'm pushing my snowboarding just for the Olympics?
Yeah, I think, while I hear the very laser focused side of you, it also feels like you don't leave yourself without some measure of a net or some other side of you, right? So I get you might put the medical stuff on the side or whatever projects, because this is, getting ready for the Olympics and making sure you have every chance to get there, that it's in your control. But it's interesting, like, I think you are unique in some ways in which, like, lots of folks who have an identity, they have a side project, they have a hustle, they have another passion. And then some people don't, or some people, like, they throw it all in, and I don't know that there's a right and a wrong, but in terms of what you have chosen as your sort of backups or your side projects, they're no joke, right? Medical school is not for everybody, and much less trying to balance. So I think it's really cool to see. And I think we've talked a little bit, your presence, you have a bit of an old soul. There's like a wise Brolin in there somewhere, that often pops his head out. And I think it's interesting to hear the questions and the things that you've been thinking about and what you'll do with it. Who knows, right? But you've got a lot of the foundation, it feels like, in place to do great things. And I think, your head and your heart's in really the right spot. So good luck with all that.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
And so in terms of outside of all this, right? Just all that's a lot of fun, a lot of work, a lot of effort. Where do you decompress? What sides do you have of you where, folks may not even a guess that you're into stuff that you are? Like, surprise me with a couple of Brolin hobbies or habits that we wouldn't necessarily know about.
Actually, it's funny. Last couple, I would say really the last year, especially this summer, I've kind of gone on to this whole soul search journey of, like, my life. And two things I do is I'm a big nerd at heart, but, like, I've become a big historian, which is kind of, like, weird. It's a little bit different from, like, the sciences and, really the biologies that I kind of, dive deeper into. And understanding history, I feel like, is fascinating and passes time pretty well. It's kind of soothing. And I've learned how to garden. I think learning how to play with soil is kind of the same as learning science, but it's just a different play. People would think it's a little old, but whatever. I have a dope garden.
Nice. And then you growing food or flowers, both?
I'm doing both. I'm trying to understand, like, native species in Utah and how to play with those, and also trying to understand how to play with weeds while also growing foods next to them. So just trying to, understand how to utilize the soil.
And you may know one of my other guests, Karsten Oliver. He's a pro skier and mountain biker out of Salt Lake, and he's a big gardener. And so, if you don't know him, I'll intro you guys. He can show you his plot.
Yeah. I'd definitely love to. I don't know. I think people that, it's a good way to free the mind into something else that's, like, mindless, but you still have to pay attention to it. There's a little bit of old knowledge that you can pick up that, I feel like our generation, we don't really seek out to get, but I don't know, maybe I'm just at that age where I'm having a midlife crisis. So
yeah. I mean, there's just something meditative and therapeutic and simple about putting your hands in the dirt and just tending to something, bigger than yourself. And around the history side of things, has there been any particular aspect of history you've been geeking out on, or just anything's fair game for you?
No, I think this is my third year of history. So I started really in the primitive with the Greek era, just to understand the Greek era. And then I went down to the Ottoman Empire, went down to the Persians. I restudied the Egyptian. And now I'm just kind of understanding African history and just kind of integrating medicine, how to understand the human body is also understanding the history behind it. And for myself, understanding myself as I grow older. And really we're going through the sum of identity. Who are you? What am I doing? And especially, I'm it's not fond of me to be aware that I am Black, and I'm just in a space where, I kind of grew up in Jackson. Now I live in Salt Lake. And so I just reached an edge of, who am I as a person, my tribe, where are my roots?
Got it. And so, and I want to make sure I caught that. Is it because, as a African and a guy with African heritage, I don't know how you describe yourself, whether you say African American or you say African descent, what's your chosen?
I'm African,
Yeah.
Like, I'm proud African. Yeah.
And so what you were saying is being an African in growing up in Jackson, were you saying that, obviously it's a fairly homogenous community here that's not African. Is that what you're kind of driving for? Like, who are you, in addition to the people you've grown up with and lived with here in Jackson, as well as I think the community in Salt Lake's probably not much more diverse, right?
Yeah. I think you nailed it right. Like, who am I in my community, but who am I in my own kind of vessel? I don't know. It's weird. I feel like I used to be very outly, who am I? Like, if this was to happen to me at the stage that I'm at, say maybe 5 years ago, who am I in my friend groups and everything? But really trying to understand who am I in my personal vessel and who am I trying to become is really an understanding of where have I come from and who makes me up. For example, even if it's not my identity that makes that curiosity, it's like, I was raised by different parents that were not my own parents. I moved a lot. There's a lot of capacities that make me question, well, why do I always, why do I bounce back? Why do I always, even if my environment changes, how come my hustle, my drive does not change? And how can I maintain that little fire? So I don't know, weird questions that people should not be asking. I should probably stay, a 20-year-old and just, maintain the same thought process. But I feel like if you're going to be flying up in the air, putting everything on the line, you should probably,
do it in all aspects of life. Throw it out there, right?
Yeah.
I think these are the exact questions that people should challenge themselves to investigate. And the nature, the nurture, the constant evolution of who we are. I mean, that's one of the reasons I got inspired to do this podcast is, we have this infinite capacity to evolve, and I don't think we have any top end of what we are capable of. And, if we're curious, if we're reflective, and I think, who we're influenced by, what's innate just in the things that were passed on to us from our families, as well as the histories from our more extended families, that stuff that gets rolled down through the generations. I think it's, and you having your family of origin, then you have your family of your childhood and the differences. And I mean, it's a fascinating set of layers in there.
Yeah. It's, I feel like sometimes it's like my brain's moving 1,000 miles an hour. There's always both ideas of curiosity and also ideas of like, this is what you need to do. Society tells you, you need to put your head down and make sure, you succeed at all pillars that you put down. For example, I look at my Olympic pursuit, for myself, obviously there's societal expectations, but also I have inner expectations, and some of those inner expectations align with the societal expectations, but like, a lot of them kind of could be my own there and where does that, differentiate? I don't know.
Yeah. And I think that's actually a really important thing for people to pay attention to is because there could be overlap between what society wants and what you genuinely do want. And then there could be what you do want and society says, no, that's not for you, or vice versa. And I think people constantly reevaluating that and paying attention to where are their motivations and who's really behind, the actions, and making sure it's you most of the time, or your trusted advisors, the people that you keep in your corner that can help you see your blind spots or can turn you a couple of degrees when you drift. I think that's awesome. Look, Brolin, it's so great to get a chance to talk to you and to tap into all these things and put a few of these thoughts for others to hear, because as someone who's gotten to know you over the years, it's like, the layers and the depth and the interesting things that all happen under one head of hair there. It's great to see. And look, all the best in whatever life throws, and looking forward to seeing you hopefully on the big screen at the next Olympics. And
crossed,
yeah. And then all the good work that you're going to do for us in the world of medicine and who knows what else. So safe drive down to Salt Lake. And thanks again for joining the show.
Thank you so much, Aaron. And thank you so much for having me and for your audience to, be able to share this space. I'm grateful. Thank you.
All right, my friend, take care.
You as well.
The Trailbreaker podcast is created by Aaron Feinberg with production support provided by Michael Morey. More interviews and videos can be found at aaronfeinberg.com.